Roxy Magurdia, one of the first girls we meet in Mushoku Tensei, is almost certainly worst girl. I'm about to explain why using material from the web and light novels, so anime onlys beware. I think Sylphie is a good candidate for best girl, as she has a lot of obvious appeal on that front, given that she's the most romantic of any of Rudeus's love interests. Pretty much the entire Magic Academy arc is built off of their budding relationship and their romantic chemistry, and she's adorable all the way throughout it. Sylphie is constantly acting cute and demure in a way that just makes you want to hug her and pat her on the head and all that, but she's also surprisingly reliable, something which she learns in her time separated from Rudeus and protecting Princess Ariel. We get to watch her become the kind of person that isn't just someone who is cute and needs protected, but also has a backbone of her own and can make hard choices when the cards are down and things get real serious. We also see later that she does a majority of the parenting in the Grey Rat household, as she fits more naturally into a caring and motherly role, not lacking on any front in that regard, being firm and caring to their children. Again, she's a great candidate for best girl. Another potential best girl is Eris, but there's a lot of baggage involving her. She's absolutely my personal favorite, but I don't really want to talk about her here for the purpose of this video. Comparing Roxy to Sylphie, if we're playing pretend and thinking about which character would be more appealing to have an honest-to-God relationship with, I think it becomes easy to say that Sylphie is the simple choice for the reasons stated above. Roxy is almost in complete contrast with Sylphie on a lot of these fronts. She's not romantic in really any way, as she's not an outwardly emotional person and is bad at expressing herself, something she picked up, or maybe rather never learned to pick up, from her upbringing as one of the only people of her race unable to communicate telepathically with each other. This left her socially stunted and she became more of an introvert. Now you can certainly be romantic despite this, but Roxy very clearly chooses not to be generally. Even when she marries Rudeus, you can see the difference between how the two treat each other. Rudeus is constantly poking at her and trying to get her attention, so enamored with his wife, whereas she mostly sits on the couch and gives off the feeling that she'd rather be left alone. Roxy is also not a mother in the typical sense. She doesn't really raise the kids very much, and she instead focuses on her career as a professor and furthering her studies. Which, I mean, that's awesome. You go. We love to see it. But again, not necessarily a trait becoming of a quote-unquote waifu. Maybe you see what I'm getting at here? I'll keep going. Something about Roxy that is very un-waifu-like, oh my god, that hurts to say, is that she's not necessarily Rudeus's soulmate or anything like that, let alone even really particularly likes him romantically until he rescues her from a dungeon. It's not like a bad thing, but it doesn't exactly inspire the budding love of a pair of star-crossed lovers like Rudeus and Sylphie does. Really, Roxy has a bunch of traits that come up in the way too many Roxy versus Sylphie debates, if you'll call them that, I've seen on forums and threads and whatnot. First of all, Sylphie would obviously win the fight, guys. I mean, she has way more combat experience. I don't care that Roxy is technically a higher rank, but no, not like that. I mean, like, Roxy does have a lot of stuff that kind of makes you think less of her. Remember her being pervy with Rudeus's parents when she was tutoring there? Pretty fucking weird when you realize that she's like 30-something. Gross. She was also a complete dick to Pax, Zenoba's brother, when she was teaching him magic at his castle. No, not when she's retaliating about all the pervy stuff he pulls, which is indefensible and he had it coming, right? I'm talking about when we see that she's actually kind of a shitty teacher to him and ruins his self-esteem in the process. She constantly is comparing him to Rudeus throughout her stay there, Rudeus being an absolute genius and this kid just being pretty above average, to the point actually pretty insensitive bullying that left him with a chip on his shoulder throughout the rest of his life. It's pretty fucked up for a teacher to be telling a kid to his face, "Yeah, you kinda suck at this. Rudeus learned it way faster." Imagine if you were told that Timmy in Class A learned algebra way quicker than you while you're already struggling. You'd be rightfully upset. Roxy also knowingly sleeps with Rudeus despite the fact that he basically can't consent because he's completely unresponsive after being traumatized, and knowing that he has a wife at home. She does it because she correctly guesses that it will pull him out of his funk after, insert spoiler here. But certainly there was another way to help him, and certainly her wanting to sleep with him was a factor in her decision-making. Really, if you think Roxy is best girl, it almost feels like it needs to be because of the elements that made her a quote-unquote bad waifu, and their specific appeal. If you like quiet kudere type girls, or if you like girls who are like rude or snide, then it's going to be those elements that appeal to you. To finally get to my actual point though, while these elements make Roxy a much less likable person and waifu by extension, they also make her one of the best characters and a much more realistic person. A character who most people at first glance probably think of as someone inserted to the story to fit an assortment of tropes for people to project their attraction onto, is actually very human and kind of bad at being a quote-unquote waifu because of it. Roxy is spiteful, to a degree with Pax that kind of makes her feel like a bad person and ends up with the dude killing himself. Roxy is kind of a creep who takes advantage of others, who pervs on Rudeus's parents and forces herself on him, basically. She's kind of over-the-top rude to even those close to her quite frequently and doesn't really show much affection. All these undesirable traits serve to make her a much stronger character and a much worse quote-unquote best girl. She never learned how to be amicable with people and ran away from her home and her problems for most of her life. She is bad at showing affection and being in a relationship given the fact that she was always longing for a perfect Prince Charming but never had anyone interested in her, account of her childlike stature. All of her flaws make her so much more interesting than the sum of her easily likable traits like other girls, to the point where I think she may even be a better character than someone like Sylphie, who is surely easier to like, but doesn't necessarily have as much depth or believability compared to Roxy, who is human to a fault. So yeah, Roxy Magodia is definitely worst girl in Mushoku Tensei, but that's okay, she's definitely a great character. Thanks for watching.